Welcome to Retreat Affairs. This is your host Sasha Cobra. I'm super happy that you have found the podcast. If you're hearing this, you're listening to our free feed that will only feature partial episodes of the podcast. If you're interested in the full conversation and all content, you need to subscribe at retreataffairs.com. There, you will get access to the full recording and a private RSS feed that you can add to your favorite podcatcher, and you will be able to access other subscriber-only content. I never want money to be the reason why you can't listen to the podcast. So if you can't afford a membership, there's an option at retreataffairs.com to request a free account, and I grant 100% of those requests, no questions asked. Orgasmic being. In this episode of the Retreat Affairs podcast, I welcome Sasha Cobra. Sasha Cobra is a teacher, healer, and energy worker who helps people to reconnect with their orgasmic energy. With the work, she enables deep healing of trauma and offers people a way to have a more joyful connection with their bodies and learn to bring conscious lovemaking in relationships into their lives. Sasha is offering workshops and retreats all around the world. She gives private sessions and she offers her work online. There are many videos of her on YouTube where you can get to know more about Sasha and The Work. Sasha has also been featured in the recent release of the Netflix documentary series Unwell. If you want to find out more about Sasha, you can go to her website, sashacobra.com. That's SASHACOBRA.com. There, you will find everything about the work, the retreats that Sasha is offering, and how to get in contact for private sessions with her. You can also follow her on Instagram at Sasha Cobra, or on facebook.com/Sasha Cobra, or on Twitter at Sasha Cobra, or on her YouTube channel where you will find more interviews and examples of her work. You will find all the links in the show notes as well as the links to all the other things that we talked about. I've come across Sasha in the most surprising way. A few years ago, I met a woman who asked me within the first 24 hours after our first meeting if I wanted to join her in a Tantra retreat. That was a quite surprising question and encounter for me. At that time, I've never before attended a workshop or training that was labeled Tantra, nor did I know anything about Sasha Cobra. Nevertheless, I got curious. I was given an opportunity and it seemed like the right moment in my life to follow that call. Everything aligned in a way that made it possible for me to go, so I went. What I experienced was a very loving and caring surrounding, and Sasha as a host and teacher who facilitated an atmosphere that always felt respectful and safe to enter deeper at my own pace. I experienced Sasha in a way as I would have seen an older friend in my teenage years. Not in age, but in wisdom and knowledge. She was like that sibling that shared what she knew with everybody who wanted to know. She had a way of sharing her observations and teachings in a joyful and natural way that made them accessible and not overwhelming. Her playfulness and mindful approach offered a space for my own exploration and curiosity. I was blessed with a wonderful connection and experience of my body, my feelings, and my aliveness that I was able to deepen and explore further in my life ever since. Looking back now and having some more experience with different tools and techniques, I still feel that Sasha has found a way of bringing the essentials together that enable us to overcome trauma, reconnect with our hidden emotions, and find back into our bodies to live our lives more joyful and ecstatic. What still strikes me is that Sasha doesn't need any labels. It's something that I've experienced in other great teachers and healers. It's the ability to detach the ego from the teachings and speak in a way that is accessible and empowering. If you have done work in this field, you might have heard about Sasha and you will get some insights about what is helpful to navigate these times that we are facing. If you've never heard of Sasha and want to feel more connected to life, listen and feel for yourself. This might be a chance to open up to something that brings more joy and juiciness into your life. I would like to mention that the audio quality is not as good as it has been in the previous episodes. Doing interviews over the internet and not being in one room brings some challenges that sometimes are hard to overcome. Nevertheless, this is still an important, wonderful episode as it touches on a topic that many of us are missing in their lives: the ecstaticness of life. I'm super happy and glad to have Sasha Cobra on the show and give you the opportunity to listen to her and get to know about Sasha and the work. Please welcome Sasha Cobra. Sasha, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time and speaking to me. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation.
How are you right now? How are you doing with these crazy times?
Well, me personally, I'm doing good. But what I'm witnessing is a lot of people are not, and in one way, it's a lot of crazy things are happening, and I always find that challenging times are very empowering times. So, depending on which route you take, depending on how you perceive reality and the actions that you take, how you engage with life, it can be a very victimizing situation or it could be an extremely empowering situation. And I always like to choose the empowering route. So, me, I'm doing good, but it's just insanity what is going on the planet. And that's really the short version. The long version is that we all know that we have been lied to historically about so many things that go on in the world. And yet, somehow, there are too many people thinking that this is an exception. And I find that to be really fascinating because there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of lies, there's agendas that have been placed into our society and what we think is, quote, normal for thousands of years, all kind of culminating, at least in my opinion, because this is the lifetime that we're in, culminating to this peak, which is the times that we're living in now. And yet, people are really blind to it. And at the same time, a lot of people are awake to it. A lot of people are waking up to it. But it's creating a lot of very interesting phenomenon. A lot of duality, let's say, between the way we perceive reality and also between people. I mean, it's just, for me, it's fascinating to see how people are so stuck on being right about things. This coronavirus part, apart from everything that's going on, what I'm saying is that it's creating is a lot of people fighting each other about what they think is right. And at the end of the day, I have my own opinions about it. You can have your own opinions about it. But there is no right or wrong. There's only love. And that is the part that we're forgetting. Because it's our unity, it's our being connected to one another, it's us loving one another, even in our differences, that we become the powerhouse that we need to be for real change. And people are stepping away from what is real, that being love, and just becoming so self-righteous about their beliefs, about what they think should and shouldn't be, and policing each other. I mean, for me, that's just all insanity. It's so far away from human nature. And that really is close and dear to my heart at present.
So, where do you exactly observe this? Is it related to the way we communicate right now at the moment? Because we're all separated and a lot of communication happens not from person to person, but online in a way that we can just shout out our opinions? Or is it also something that you experience in real conversations with people in interaction?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm connecting with a lot of people because I still continue to do a lot of sessions online. So I get personal stories from people, but that's not the focus of the sessions. Where I really get to see that is in two places. One is when I'm out and about in the world, just a quick grocery store visit, or, driving to get gas, wherever, just being out in the world, you see how people interact with one another, how they look at one another, how they fear one another, how they police one another. I mean, it's just, the agenda is deep, and on some level it's working, because when you see how people are interacting with one another, it's so backwards to what we need to be doing. And then the other part, of course, is social media. I mean, the social media wall is like a representation of the present moment collective. And of course, it's a little bit biased because obviously my wall is going to be my community. And that community, to my surprise, has very different opinions from what I may have. You know, it's quite mixed. It's not just that everybody's supporting my opinions. So it's fascinating for me to see that even from the people that have connected to me through social media, which, quote, come from spiritual communities or, you know, more conscious communities, it's such a mixed understanding of what's going on and then what they do on that social media. You know, for example, I will publish something, make a post on my own wall. And now of course, people come in and start telling me that I'm wrong and that how could I be sharing this? And there is resistance to it. And then of course, there's people that support it. And then they start fighting each other. And I literally have come on my social media posts and say, there's never a reason for a lack of kindness to stop the fights, you know? And I have said that not just to people that are going against what I'm writing, but the people that are trying to support what I'm writing, calling names to the others. You know, that for me, again, what I'm saying is that this is not about right or wrong. This is about love. This is about our humanity. So this going at odds with one another, even if I agree with the opinions of some of those people, there's no reason for them to be calling names to others with different opinions or fighting them or just being violent. What is this thing with violence? It is so far from what it means to be human. And that's what I'm seeing is just this lack of compassion, lack of connection, and a very violent way of communicating, looking at each other. You know, I'm not talking about actual violence of just having to physically get involved in violence, but just how when you walk through a store, how people look at one another. That disconnection, that fear of one another. You know, everybody's walking around in fear that they're going to get some virus that nobody even knows that if anyone has, or if it even exists. And yet they look at each other out of fear of don't get close to me. You know, my partner and I were in a store yesterday, and they're so strict with the masks in the store. And so he pulled down the mask, unfortunately wearing it, to send a message. And the lady standing in line, we're not talking about the employees, we're talking about regular people just standing in line at the store, turned around and started to give him a lecture about how that's disrespectful and he needs to put the mask on. And this is the thing that I'm speaking about, is that we believe so much of what is being told to us. And we know that we have been lied to on a huge scale for years, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Why do we all of a sudden believe this narrative? When so many people are speaking out, I'm not talking about speaking out people like myself, although I do a lot of research. I'm talking about people that have been doctors for 30, 40 years. I'm talking about virologists. I'm talking about scientists. I'm talking about people that have a history of studying certain subjects in a really, really deep way. And they are speaking out and they are being censored. So there's so many scientists, there's so many doctors, virologists that are speaking out. And all of these people are getting censored. And when people start to be censored on a regular basis, you really have to ask yourself, why? You know, it's just like the books that were burned as something that happened in our societies for so many years of deleting information. We now look back at that and think, what was the information that was being deleted? What was being hidden from us? And now the same thing is happening in present day. This way of censoring the people on the internet is like the book burning from that we had experienced prior in our civilization. And you have to ask yourself why. Why are all of these people being silenced? Why is it that something just like speech, communication, information can be so dangerous, quote, dangerous?
Is it when you see it compared in your work? I feel that there has been already many things before where people had information and just have been refusing to listen to it, to take it into their reality. Might it be climate change? Might it be the way we approach our health, nutrition, but also our sexuality? Um, do you actually feel there is a difference right now in how people perceive their reality?
I'm not sure I understood your question.
I mean, in a way that there has been always scientists talking about the effects of climate change and how important it is, but still people don't change their behavior. And in the same way now, there's some scientists saying, okay, there's a dangerous virus, and others saying it's not dangerous, and people don't know what and who to believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's all valid, and I think that's why it's so important to research alternative points of view. So when any individual that is doing some kind of investigative work, they're always going to look at many, many sources of information. And what really puts this situation distinct from so many others is that we're getting the same narrative on mainstream media, and the same things are being communicated to us by the same groups of people. Now, alternative information is available, but people are not looking outside of the mainstream information to find that alternative information. So it's a matter of understanding, but you have to have a certain awareness to actually desire to know. And most people don't know, and unfortunately don't care. And, even the talk about climate change, I don't necessarily know that I believe that narrative either. There's so much information out there that is saying that, yeah, climate is being impacted and things are happening, but not to the way that we're being told that climate change is so dangerous to us. So as I said, there's so much information out there. I don't draw conclusions on anything, but I never stop researching.
And isn't that also something about what you try to bring to people in your teaching, in your offerings, bringing people back to a state where they can experience for themselves? I mean, like when it comes to sexuality, like how much do we define our sexuality by everything that we are presented through media, through our surroundings, and there's also a lot of confusion going on.
Exactly. And it's absolutely right that all the work that I'm doing is about bringing people to a place where they learn for themselves what is good for them, what's in alignment for them, what is truth. I always say you don't have to believe me, but start investigating, start exploring, and doing it through experience. So all I'm doing is just pointing people in the right direction. But from that place, they get to know what's right for them. Because there really is no right for any individual person that fits everybody else for everything in life. So the work is really bringing people back to connecting to their own spirit and letting that spirit be the guiding force. Now, when it comes to sexuality, again, it's just like you said, we have been bombarded with one narrative about what sex ought to be. Whether it's the narrative that we get through porn, which is so far from real sex, whether it's the narrative that we get through Hollywood, which, depending on the movie and the scene, but I don't know a whole lot of women that are so satisfied from a 2-minute frenzy, passionate, her being pressed up against the wall experience. She might get excited about some mental idea of being so adored for those 2 minutes. But I don't know any woman that actually has enough time to relax and feel true pleasure in that amount of time. So the ideas that we get from porn, from Hollywood, from religion, from all of the repression and the oppression and the suppression that is put on people when it comes to their sexual energy, which is their life force energy, their primal natural energy that they are made out of. And then on top of that, now, this is also a very interesting topic, which I don't know, Sasha, if you have delved into or have seen pop up, but the WHO, the World Health Organization, has now come out with a new curriculum and standards for sex education for children in schools. And that information is very public. You can find it on their website, and it is sick. It is sick. There's no need for adults to educate toddlers about masturbation.
And this is something that it says in the guidelines from the World Health Organization.
Yes, as these cults often do, they put all the information in plain sight. So it's basically, when the information is present, when it's available to the public, and we go along with it, we are agreeing to something that is available, that is presented. And so, yeah, this is up on the World Health Organization website. You can download this information. You can find it online. Pedophilia is something that is now taught in schools already as part of sex education. And there's just so many things that are backwards, because when adults start to come into the conversation of teaching young children about sexuality, oftentimes it becomes very perverse and skewed and misinformed. Children are going to discover their bodies. I don't know any young boy that doesn't discover his penis and start masturbating at some point in his life. But he doesn't need to be told by adults how to do that prior to him discovering it himself. He doesn't need to be told how to do that as a toddler. He doesn't need to be told about lots of things, which I don't want to go into because you can find this on the World Health Organization. So again, it's one of those things that I would rather that people search for it, look for it, and decide for themselves. Do you find that this is the sex education that young adults and children, tiny children, need to receive at such an early age, given to them by adults that have no clue about sex and healthy sexuality?
So how do we become more informed and more aware human beings, in the sense that we can find our own truth and make our own decisions based on our own reality?
Well, the first thing that people have to do is really question everything. And that's something that has been trained out of us ever since we were little. I mean, think about how parents often parent their children, and then how the school system creates an environment for children to learn it. There's no space for thought, independent thought. There's no space for you to decide for yourself what is good for you, what's not good for you. We're from day one trained to follow directions, to follow instructions, and never rely upon the callings of our spirit. And that starts in our family units, that goes on into the schooling system, and then that goes on into the work system. Following our bosses and being told what to do and following structures. I mean, even if you think about just touching back to the coronavirus situation, so many of these doctors that are supporting the narrative that is being told to us through the mainstream media, where are they getting this information? A lot of the information that they get is based on what they have been told in medical school. And who controls what is being taught in medical school? Who controls the pharmaceutical companies? Who's in charge of all of that? Are these intelligent human beings that have done research and are pro-life? And when I say pro-life, I'm talking about people that support the health and nature of the body. Or are these people that control the pharmaceutical industry that is dependent upon you being sick? So we're taught information, and humans are so intelligent in the sense that we're creative, we can process information in incredible ways. So we take in information, we learn things, and then we just regurgitate it back. But we oftentimes don't use our own independent thought to decipher what is real, what is not real, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And for people in the medical industry, it's a very difficult situation, because if you ever go outside the narrative of what is being told to you and taught to you in the medical system, which is medical school and basically what is told to you is the correct thing, they will have their license taken away. So everybody is controlled in so many ways, except for those individuals that basically say, for me, truth goes beyond everything else. And I don't even care if my license gets taken away, because I care about humans so much that I cannot get myself to lie when I know the truth, being something different. And I have the utmost respect for these people, and there are plenty of them. This is why I'm saying this coronavirus situation can be full of insanity and at the same time very empowering, just to see people really stand up to truth, stand up to love, stand up for love, stand up for truth, and speak out on these topics. So when we start to question things day to day on a regular basis, we start to exercise our ability to now see things that are beyond the small box that we were put in. And one of the deepest ways for us to understand what is good for us is to connect to our bodies. And how many people do you know that are just fully embodied, fully connected to feeling their body? Because that body is the messaging board between you and spirit. That body is what your spirit uses to speak to you. That's what so much of the pain, discomfort, tension is in our body. That spirit saying, you're not paying attention, and I'm trying to get your attention. So I make a little rash over here. I give you a little discomfort over here. You're not listening? Okay, let's put it up a notch. Let me really make it hurt for you. Pay attention. But we don't know that. We don't look at the spiritual side of things. So people don't want to be in their bodies. But that body, the wisdom, the knowledge that comes from the body is such a tool for navigating through the insane world that we live in. It's the tool that makes you know when something's for you, when it's not. When something is in alignment, or when something needs to be changed. When you're in an environment and you need to leave the room because it is not for you. When you're in a conversation and you know it's going in a direction that is not for you. So again, we look at our society, we look at everything, and going back to the sex part that we talked about. Well, yeah, we're misinformed, but why are we being so deeply misinformed about sex? Why is it that sex has been attacked on this planet, plane, whatever it is? Why has this been attacked for so many years, thousands of years? In my research and in my checking through information, rarely have you ever seen healthy sexuality being a norm of society.
What do you think? Why is it?
Because if you rob people of sex, you rob them of their power. Sexually liberated people can never be controlled because they are connected to the essence of who they are. And when a person is connected to that, they're connected to their spirit. They're connected to this force, this power, this infinite awareness, this beauty, God, whatever you want to call it. You can't make them do things that don't make sense. So if you want to control a people, there's many ways to do that. But a huge one, a big one, is taking their sex away from them. And that's what has happened to us. Because sex is a gift. It's in its nature a healing modality and a tool for self-empowerment, for raising consciousness, for making us be human in the truest sense. And when I say human, I'm talking about being a loving, joyous, orgasmic being. That's what being human is. It's our compassion and our love that makes us human. And when you take sex away from people, you rob them of a tool that reconnects them to their humanity as loving and compassionate human beings. So they've taken it away from you by misinforming you, by showing you something else and calling it sex, by showing you porn and saying that's sex, by showing you romantic fantasies through Hollywood movies and calling that sex, by showing you how it's so dirty to have sex outside of marriage and calling that normal. The amount of stuff that is in the way between people and them naturally, relaxedly, I like to make up words, and enjoying sex, the amount of stuff that sits between them and their sex is enormous. Most people have to climb over mountains just to get to a place of getting out of their head and relaxing to feel. So that's one part of it. And then we look at the rest of our society. It's a trauma-induced society. Another way of disempowering people. Induce trauma. They're easy to trigger. They're easy to control. They're easy to manipulate. You put out one stimuli into their environment, they're triggered, and now they no longer have control over their own vehicle, their thoughts, emotions, or perception. Now they're being controlled by the trauma that they store in the body. So you induce trauma, and that's what everybody here is walking around with trauma. And I don't care if we're talking about trauma because they've had real physical abuse, real traumatic situations, sexual abuse, or it's the trauma of living in a sick society that is backwards to nature. That's already traumatic enough.
And isn't that then also a challenge in the moments when you offer something, when you offer your gift to people, to also trust in the process that people will find your work whenever they need it? Isn't that sometimes a challenge, or is it a challenge sometimes to see what's happening in the world, and still trusting in, okay, it will take the time it needs to reach a certain amount of people, to get through to all those who maybe don't want to see right now, who are not ready to see and feel?
Yeah, I really trust in life. So as I'm saying all of that to you, do I just sit back and do nothing in my life? Of course not. I put a lot of energy into continuing to give out, to share, to do whatever I can to let people know that I exist. Because that's something that I hear often from a lot of clients that I have. They always say, how come I didn't know about you before? And, I don't have a big social media presence. It's very challenging for me to give energy to those kinds of things because I'm so busy actually doing the work that I don't have time to promote the work. But I do wish that it was shared on a much bigger scale because people need it. And it's also interesting because this Netflix documentary just came out. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a documentary series called Unwell, and I'm featured there. And it's interesting because ever since that came out, I'm getting a flood of session requests and so many people sending emails. And it's been a big boom in my expansion as far as the work goes. And it's happening at the precise moment when people are waking up to a lot of things. So, even just with what I said, it's nature has its timings. This documentary series was filmed last year, almost a year ago. And because of Corona, it was postponed in being released. It was supposed to be released months ago. And they kept postponing it and postponing it. And the time when it actually came out, I feel, in my perspective, that it's a time when more people are actually open to this kind of information. People have been sitting around at home just researching things, and things that have been way outside of their paradigm and reality, they are now very much open to, and now, boom, this lands there. Nature has its timings, and I trust in that, but I play my role. I'm very active in what I do. I'm all the time putting out energy because I respond to what life gives me. And what I mean by that is that we all have this internal energy that drives us, pushes us, inspires us creatively to express. We're just vehicles for creativity. We are vehicles for God. We are vehicles for divine energies that want to be expressed through each and every one of us. That's what makes all of us so beautiful, because we literally are one. We are different expressions of the same divinity that is expressed through each and every one of us in its different flavors. So when we connect to our bodies, when we connect to our heart's calling, whatever terms we want to use to describe it, when we rely on that, there's this creativity that wants to be expressed through us. Even if it's saying hello to somebody on the street, that's the creativity that wants to be expressed. Whether it's an art project, whether it's the creativity that wants us to research information, whatever it is, are you a servant to your own godly force? Because that is the only thing you should be serving. And that's what the thing that I'm attempting to remind people all the time. This is not about anybody else but you. And I'm not talking about the self-righteous, egoic aspect of you. I'm talking about the divinity that lies within you. And when you serve that fully and wholeheartedly, you serve all of humanity with that.
It's definitely something that I've experienced in my own life, that every time I haven't given in to what wanted to come out, and that was especially for a long time, things that I haven't said, that I haven't expressed my feelings through words and then also through actions, to showing it through my body. This was always giving me a kind of really terrible feeling, in a sense, not feeling comfortable in my body. And just knowing what kind of release it is to really express myself. And I feel there is an intelligence that helps me, like you said. It's not coming from a self-righteous source, but it's something, as long as it comes from love, as it comes from truth, there's something that needs to come out, and the moment I'm able and ready to express it, it's just a beautiful feeling. And that helped me really a lot, to just go into this feeling and like express it more and more and more, and just be willing and able to fully feel whatever comes up. And it's not always pleasant. The feeling itself is not always pleasant. Sometimes it comes with fear, it comes with anxiety, but just going through it, and also not being afraid of feeling something that is maybe unpleasant, but knowing that there's also an opportunity for something else, and that missed opportunity was something that I've always been that gave me that bad feeling. And it's like when you hear people talking about like lying on their deathbed and looking back onto their life, and about all their regrets. But I feel now that with everything I do and the moment I express myself, I'm just dropping another moment of regret, and that's just beautiful.
Yes, the beauty and this liberation of being, of just being. And that's the art that we have been civilized out of. It's fear is conditioned. We are conditioned with fear. Love and fearlessness, which are really one and the same, that's what we are. When you look at children, young children, right? Because we condition them with fear. They're fearless. The way they climb on top of things, the way they crawl all over stuff, the way they cry, the way they blurt out things, they're fearless in their expression. They're just being. And how beautiful that is. And what are children when they're just being? Unconditional love. That's what we are. That's our nature. That's our essence. That's why children are such great and beautiful teachers to us. So it's about us coming back to our nature as love. And it's like you said, the journey is, can you feel the moment of resistance and jump anyway? And I'm not talking about in every single situation. Obviously, use your intelligence. You'll know when something's right and wrong for you. But I'm talking about in our day-to-day stuff of, I feel something, I want to say something, but I'm scared what the other person's going to think. And I'm scared if I'm going to be rejected. And I'm scared if I won't be accepted. And what if I'm wrong? It's just unnecessary waste of energy. Even if you're wrong, who cares? Make mistakes. Children make mistakes all the time. It is life-giving to them to play. And we have forgotten the art of playfulness. This life is a game that we are here all attempting to figure out. It's just like when you turn on a video game and you don't read the instructional manual, which nobody does. You just start playing. Like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out what hurts you. You'll figure out what gives you more points. You'll work it out. That's what life is. And we ought to learn to play the game of life so we have more experience, so we have more understanding about what is the best way for us to play individually and collectively. And we've all been imprisoned in our mind, limited in how we think and how we share and how we express. And all of us, this is a slave culture. We live imprisoned in our perception. And this conversation can go really deep, because when I first just voiced that to you, I'm referring to the basics of imprisonment, meaning the basics of the fact, what I just described, of being scared to say certain things, being scared to leave certain situations, just the basics of the day-to-day. But we're imprisoned in a very limited perception of reality, even with what reality really is. For all those people that can look beyond our physical world, for people that see ghosts, for people that see spirits, for people that can see behind the veil of reality, there is so much that we don't know. And that's okay, but the question is, do you have the awareness to be aware of the fact that you're in a prison, so that you can start trying to figure out how to free yourself from it? Because life is the way it is. Reality is the way it is. The things are in place the way they are. We don't need to cry about it. We don't need to be victimized by it. But we need to face the truth of what it is and realize there's so much more.
Yeah, it's I guess there is a lot of knowledge out there, and especially feeling it through the body. Like for myself, one of the most important things that I've ever realized was I was going through a lot of pain in my early 30s, just like physical pain in my body, emotional pain. And at times I was really scared. I was really scared in the sense that I felt like, oh, how am I going to reach my 60s if I'm already in so much pain? It's crazy. And how I just was attached to the pain. Every time I had something like, I don't know, like a stiff neck or something, I already felt when that came up, I was just in that mindset of suffering. I'm gonna have that for another few weeks, and I cannot enjoy my life and everything. And then, like, one of the most important things for me was that it changes, and I was able to get out of this, and that I was able to transform my body, that I had the power to heal myself in a way, to go through this. And now when something comes up, and for sure I have bad days and I have moments where I'm tense, where I'm stressed, and then my body expresses it, but I'm not attached to that anymore. I'm not attached to that fear anymore. I know it's a situation, it's a moment, it's something I can experience, and it's that sign, it's that kind of reminder, okay, there's something that I need to address. Maybe I need to take more time for myself. Maybe I need to rest, to relax. Maybe I have to change my diet a little bit. And that gave me such an empowerment and also such a freedom that I really felt, okay, there is so much I don't know, but there's also so much that I can still learn. And Like for myself, it has been, yeah, the practice of yoga where there is, and I've been talking just in another episode with one of my teachers, Petros, who said like, okay, there have been all these yogis, these sages, wise people, healers throughout centuries, and they have experienced that again and again and again, and they have shared that, and they have found techniques and said like, okay, here is it, here's an offering, and you can try it for yourself and you can experience it for yourself.
Yes. And it's beautiful that you came to this understanding, and you're absolutely right that it could be food, it could be all kinds of things that you need to change. But I would also really inspire you to look at those things and look at the spiritual side of it, meaning literally going into your body and asking your body why it's hurting. And I'll give you an example. I literally yesterday had a session with this woman, young woman, beautiful lady, such a sweet woman, incredible. And she said that her body's achy all the time. It's achy. She's gone to doctors. They've run a bunch of tests. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with you, but she's in pain all the time. Her hip was hurting, her neck was hurting, and just a general achiness. Well, when we start to look at her life and her upbringing, to not go into the details, she had a rough childhood, a lot of stress, a lot of harshness. As a young girl, as a teenager, she got pregnant very young. At 16, she had her first child. Never really had great support from parents, had an abusive childhood. I mean, just harsh. And all of that pain that she never had the space to express, because she would literally, get slapped and beat if she was to express it. All of that pain, emotional pain, was being held in the body. So then it manifests as physical pain. So the journey now is we go through the body, and bit by bit, part by part, we start to communicate with the body. What is hurting here? So for example, she went into her hip that's been hurting for a long time, for years it's been hurting. And when we got to the hip, as an example, that was one of the body parts. It was, first of all, the first thing that came up is all the sex that she had that she didn't want to have. The type of sex that her body was saying no to, and she allowed it. Okay, well, the body goes, I don't want this to be happening. We override our bodies and we store the feelings, we store the trauma of that. We go a little bit deeper in her hip. And I told you that she got pregnant at 16, or she gave birth at 16. And the doctor, she said it was a female doctor, was so angry that day. She was so harsh with her body and the trauma of that. That starts coming out, and she's just crying all of it out. The next layer, the epidural, she said, my hip is saying that it's been hurting because it's been paralyzed. Because when she got that epidural and giving birth, her hips went into a trauma because of it. So all of those tears, all this crying out, all of this crying, and then at the end of the session, the hips have space. They empty out the pain. They cry out the pain. They create more space inside. Now the body can find a new way of functioning, of maneuvering, the softness, the plasticity that needs to happen inside. So much of the pain and the tension that we carry, especially as young people, such as yourself, it happens from a psycho-spiritual reason. It's a psycho-spiritual phenomenon. So absolutely, I'm all for healthy eating. Absolutely, I'm all for exercise and moving the body because the body needs movement. But what about the stuff that we hold and suppress and retain that have to do with psycho-spiritual phenomena, emotions, trauma, and for example, as many men do, and I'm thinking of, for example, many people many male bodies that I have worked with that have a lot of tension in the hips, the amount of shame they carry around their sex and what it means to be a man. So we can be going to all kinds of doctors, trying to do all kinds of, massage. For example, going to doctors and getting pharmaceuticals for erectile dysfunction. But what is the underlying cause? If a man is shamed at being a man, at having a penis, if he's scared of his sex, if he's scared of his desire, if he's scared of his fire, his oomph, his power, he's going to have to do some very unnatural holding in the body. And that unnatural holding in the body, that tension, is going to create imbalances that may show up as premature ejaculation. They may show up as erectile dysfunction. They may show up as very rigid hips. They may show up just as pain in the body. But there's no pharmaceutical that's going to go to the root of the problem. All of those are just cover-ups. And we need to come back to our nature. We want to be whole beings. We want to have our bodies respond because our bodies are feeling juiciness and vibrancy. And that's why a man gets an erection, not because some pharmaceutical makes his penis erect while he still can't feel it. Because that's what a lot of men communicate to me, is that when they take pharmaceuticals for getting an erection, they still can't feel their penis. They still don't have pleasure. They may be able to use it, but that's not sexual fulfillment.
Where do you see the challenge? I mean, before you mentioned that we shouldn't teach children about sexuality and give them the space to explore themselves. And then by everything, how we are bombarded, and especially nowadays where everything is also accessible for young kids through the internet, and everybody's carrying around a smartphone and they have access to all this kind of information. And but then our own exploration in especially early years, like what could help to bring people to a more healthy and natural sexuality and connection to their bodies, especially in those years when we are mostly exploring ourselves in that way.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic that you brought up. And it's such a different conversation now with the internet being such an integrated aspect of our lives than a conversation we could have had about this 30 years ago. Because for our generation, that's not even 30 years ago, but for our generation, at least I'm just going to speak for myself, it was a lot more exploring sexuality through experience. Meaning, you're next to a boy's body and he touches you and you touch him and you see how it feels. And it's a little awkward, but you don't know what you're doing and you're just trying to figure it out as you go along. And in a way, that's beautiful. Because you're learning through experience what feels good and what doesn't feel good. You don't have enough conditioning and ideas that you got from outside about how things should look and be performed as. You're actually just left to explore. And for the younger generations now, it's just like you said, porn is everywhere. So the moment that a child or a young adult gets into a moment of discovering, oh, there's something like sex, well, what do we do with everything else when we want to learn about it? We Google it. So if a young individual was to type in sex, he would get a lot of sex education online, very backwards to what sex actually really is. So this is a situation that we're in, absolutely. And there has to be information provided to young adults that is outside of what they would come across in porn. But what I'm saying is there's no need to teach toddlers about masturbation. They don't care about that. And most adults are so confused about sex themselves, they only have porn sex themselves. How are you ever going to educate an individual about sex if you don't know anything about it? So there absolutely have to be programs, teachers, books, information provided to younger people and adult people, because they are just as confused about sex as the young ones. In fact, even more, because they already think they know when they don't. So that information absolutely has to be available, but that quality information does not come through institutions that are set up to rob you of your sex. It doesn't come through public school education, where teachers are not allowed to say anything outside of what they are told to say when it comes to history, when it comes to science, when it comes to sexual education, all of it. I mean, everything is an institution, and everybody has to abide by the rules, and if they don't, they're not allowed to be there. So the rarity really nowadays is to come across people that really know things. And that's not just in the field of sex, that's about everything. It's very hard to come across a doctor that, and I'm saying a local doctor, obviously they exist, they're all over the internet, I'm seeing them. But if you're just in your local area and you want to find a good doctor or a good dentist or a good sex educator or a good yoga teacher, it doesn't even matter what it is, you know? It's good people are hard to find these days. And the reason why is because it takes a lot of courage, a lot of love, a lot of commitment to love, truth, to do things out of the callings and the intelligence of your spirit, and not because you are just regurgitating dogma that you picked up somewhere else. So it would be so beautiful for people to create even, not just sex education programs, but something where people can see sex as true lovemaking. Because we want to see it. Meaning, for even a lot of adults that I work with, they say, well, what should it look like? And I always shy away from that question, because it's not about how it looks, it's how it feels. But I also understand that if I'm going to a dance class and I ask a teacher, how do I do this dance type? And I dance tango. So my tango teacher could say, it's the feeling. Find the feeling in it. Well, I also need to see how it looks, and that helps me. So I may watch a lot of tango dancing videos before I come to a place of going like, I see it. Now I'm going to see it in my body. But where do you find beautiful lovemaking on the internet? Where do you even, at one point I came across the idea of, I was having a conversation with someone about kissing, and I was saying, like, there's no beautiful kisses on the internet. Where do you find people kissing beautifully? And so I got on the internet and I started searching. Maybe I didn't search far enough, maybe I didn't search deep enough, but I couldn't find anything. There's more sex being shown, even on the non-pretty side, that there's sex, but there's no kissing. There's no love. It's just performance and robotics. Robotics meaning not literally, but the robotic way of doing things, the very non-aware way of doing things that most people do when they engage with another in intimacy. And it's hard to find beauty. And we need to celebrate that. I mean, I have seen on the street, it's in our culture nowadays, and I don't know what it's like in every single culture because I haven't been to every single one, but making a very large generalization, when we see people arguing on the street, we walk by them and we don't say anything. We're just like, let them be, whatever, they're just doing their thing. They're fighting, whatever. If we see people making out, if we see people loving on each other, if we see people kissing on each other, it's looked at as grotesque.
You hardly see it.
First of all, you hardly see it, but think about it, and I mean, for everybody listening to this, so many people get embarrassed being physically affectionate in public. Like holding hands, okay. You know, giving a hug, sometimes they don't even like to hug for a long time. That's okay. But if we start to enjoy each other's bodies, if we start to really touch each other's bodies, all of that has been made so taboo. We're embarrassed by beauty. Now, an argument and fighting each other on the street, which for me is grotesque, violence is ugly. That's normal. That's okay. We walk by that and we don't complain. But if people are loving each other, if they're in love and they're physically loving and playing with each other's bodies and enjoying each other, and I'm not talking about in a porn style, just loving. Why is that so ugly that we have to make a comment or stop it or look at it in disgust? It's beautiful. Children need to see more of that than they need to see violence on the street. And I find that for a lot of people, the reason why they're so emotionally moved by loving, physically loving, sensual, sexual acts is because everybody's starving so much for that in their own life. So many people are dried out in that area of their life that seeing others enjoy triggers their own pain deeply. And that's where the strong emotions come from. You know, it's very fascinating because I do workshops and groups and things like that. And well, you know.
Yeah.
and and I have done groups with women. And when we have these groups, we create the space for, and I do these kind of energetic activations where these women can be in orgasmic states and go into full body orgasms. And so the room is loud. Some women are crying, some women are yelling, and some women are just like in fully orgasmic moaning states. And at the end of that, we have a debrief. We always have a debrief because it's so important for us as humans to share, to grow together. And in that sharing, I'll oftentimes ask women, what did they feel? What did they experience? And there'll always be some women that say that when they heard the other women be orgasmic, rage came up in them. Anger came up in them. And that's the beauty of the debriefing, is that discussion, that communication, that understanding of why we feel the things that we feel. And how, because we lack so much of that pleasure in our own lives, that hearing another woman can really trigger that in us. And what does that mean for us? And how do we process that? It's a very beautiful and transformative experience for everybody in the room. Especially because most women all think that they're defective, and they think that nothing good ever happens to them, and everything's for other women. And all of us think like that. So it's quite educational, but it triggers a lot of emotions for people.
I mean, you're talking now about women and creating that safe space for women to express themselves. How about men?
Yeah, I mean, dear heart, I worked only with men for 8 years. So my world was all men and only working with men and doing group work with men as well, where they would have the same kind of energetic experiences and we would go into that. It's just that and this is true for men and women, of course, but for men, it's, and mind you also, now I do mixed groups as well, so it happens for men and women together at the same time. But for men, because they hold on to so much feeling and so much emotion, when that energy comes into the body, the first thing that happens is a big emotional release. All the pain they've been holding, all their insecurities, all their feelings of lack of self-worth, just all the stuff that they have put up with, all the pain that they have endured, that's the first thing that comes out. And with that, what comes out is a big lion's roar that the world needs more than ever coming out of those male bodies. That power, that oomph and that power that we all need to have for men as the kings and the warriors that they are to be and walk with in the world. Because men have really, again, this is true for men and women. Everything I say is true for men and women. But just speaking about the men, they have really been made to feel small. And especially in these last, let's say, even 2 decades, with all the next level feminism and the hashtag #MeToo movement, and just so much of putting the woman up in a place of the boss lady and the warrior woman, and it's everything about women. And men just feel like, where's our place here? And not only is where's our place here, but I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to be the man that has been dominating, as I have seen historically. I don't want to be the dictator. Definitely don't want to be the abuser and the rapist. So men have shrunk within themselves, and they keep doing it. And so when that power hits, that's what orgasmic states are there for, is to connect you to your power. Now, whether that happens in sex, whether it happens in another way, or whether it happens in these type of energetic experiences, when that orgasmicness comes into the body, that lion's roar, that lion that has been caged for a lifetime, comes out to the top of the hill, and he roars and lets the whole valley hear, I am here, and I am the king of this kingdom. And that's power.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that, and it has been quite liberating to feel it myself, and also to feel, like, now looking backwards, to see the confusion, because like you said, I don't want to be this or that as a man. I don't want to be whatever. I don't want to oppress. I don't want to be too harsh, too hard, whatever. But on the other side, feeling, and that's, again, it's not there is an inner truth that tells me that I am not harsh, I am not in a way bad towards a woman, but experiencing that raw, that power, also gave me the feeling of how much I've been holding back of my own masculinity. And that's very liberating to actually feel that, to see, wow, there is so much more that I haven't connected to. Always feeling for most of my life pretty much connected to my female side, but then actually being able to explore my masculine side, which I haven't dared for a long, long, long time. And then experiencing that also in the presence of a woman is amazing. To be able to really feel myself as a man with all that power that's there, with all that energy that's moving, that has been stuck for such a long time, and it just wants to free itself. It's beautiful to feel that.
And what's also very beautiful to feel is for the woman to feel you be like that. Because women yearn to be in the presence of that maleness, that power, that kingliness, that fire. It's such a beautiful experience for a woman to be in the presence of a man that carries his masculine energy on his sleeve and walks with it with pride. And what you'll find is that men that are like that are such loving, compassionate humans.
It's also something I have through that experienced an energy in my partner, in a woman, that I haven't experienced before, where it seemed now like there was always a kind of, we both haven't been fully in our energy, in our female or masculine powers, yeah, respecting to our sex. But then being able to feel that in a woman is another part, not just to feel myself, but then also to experience what it actually does to a woman when she can really be herself and be in her own energy. It's just like, wow, that's possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it's literally like the beauty of a fish being a fish and the beauty of an elephant being an elephant, right? Now, if the elephant was pretending to be a fish and the fish pretending to be an elephant, it would just be silly. It would be weird. It would be awkward. It would be disempowering. But when they sit and relax in their nature, oof, what beauty it is to be who you are meant to be. And so this is another addition to the list of how do you disempower people. You confuse them about who they are. So you make the men hate their maleness, and you make the women hate their femininity. You make them turn against their nature, and you confuse them. And what do I mean by confusion? Just that feeling of disconnection with your nature, with the energy that moves through you naturally. And mind you that all of us have both masculine and feminine energy, absolutely. But we need to make sure that those energies are balanced. And when a man denies or resists or rejects his masculine power, it throws the masculine energy and the feminine energy out of balance. Now what you have is an emotional male that has a hard time making decisions, that is easily manipulated, easily thrown off center. That's not a balanced man. And if you take a woman and you make her look at femininity as weakness, which for us as women, that's what we were taught by our mothers and our mothers by their mothers and now by society and the media, that acting as a male is more powerful. You do that, we miss all the power that we have, the magic, the intuition, the magnetism, the ability to have such a deep feeling nature to know things, to magnetize things to get things done, not have to fight and force things to be done. Now again, I love the masculine energy in me, because that masculine energy in me is the one that guides, the one that leads, the one that brings clarity to people. I'm in my masculine all the time, but I better love the woman in me, because if I don't, I deplete myself, I exhaust myself, I wear myself out, and I'm gonna be unhappy and miserable all the time. So for myself as a woman, especially with the conditioning that I have received, as all of us have in this culture, although I find that it's very likely that in some more indigenous cultures, the roles are a little bit more balanced. But still, I'm seeing on the unhealthy side. Again, when we're talking about the unhealthy side, is that masculine energy is not dominating. It's not the rapist, it's not the abuser. That's the unhealthy version. The same way that feminine energy is receptive, it's not submissive, it's not subservient, it's receptive, it's soft, it's flexible, but it doesn't mean that it's subservient to something or anything all the time. So for myself as a woman, if I lean all the time, because I have to consciously lean toward choosing the softer side, being more receptive, enjoying my sensuality, enjoying my feminine body, no matter how it looks or however I may judge it based on the criteria of what society tells me it should look like. The more I lean there, the more the masculine energy in me is the healthy one. The one that gives me the ability to speak truth, to have clarity, to guide, to lead. All those beautiful masculine qualities are right there with me without becoming the dictator, the controller, the dominator. And same is true for the man. When the man leans toward really developing his masculine qualities of leadership, of expressing truth, that's a huge one for men. They don't speak out anymore. They're scared to speak out. They're scared to disturb. Again, because they don't want to be the abuser. They don't want to be the, historically, like all the men that have ever happened. But if they start to exercise all of that, it's a self-love act. And in that self-love act, the woman in you, the female energy in you, will be right there to nourish you, to nourish others, to be intuitive, highly compassionate, highly loving. Now you're a leader that listens. Now you're a guide that has compassion, not a dictator, not a controller, not someone that dominates, but a true leader that is a strong male on the outside and is guided by a strong female on the inside.
I felt that the more I am in my masculine energy, the more I see myself and actually feel myself in my masculine energy, I'm also able to accept a woman that is truly in her female energy much, much more. Before it was way more challenging. It was something that was really confusing and that I couldn't really stand.
There can only be one female in a relating dynamic, the same way that there can only be one male. And that's where people have a lot of challenges in relationships, because if the woman is very much in her masculine, there's no room for the man to be in the male posture. And if the male is very feminine, there's no room for her to be a woman. She kind of gets pulled to be in the masculine. Now, again, it's not to say it's anyone's fault. I always say it's either no one's fault or it's everybody's fault. Meaning we're all responsible. And just like on a scale where when you put a weight on one side, the other one goes up, and then you can put the weight on the other side and the other one goes up and balances out. Same way happens in these relationship dynamics. We can choose to make certain choices and develop ourselves and change who we are on our side. And by default, it moves and shifts the other in another position. So obviously it's beautiful when both of us participate in the act, but even one person in a partnership can really expand and grow or relating to another level if they really commit themselves to where they need to be in their responsibility. That brings for a healthier dynamic in relating.
Do you sometimes experience in your own relationship that you are not in the different poles, but then you are both on one side, and how does that play out?
Absolutely. And here's what I want to say is that you rarely ever discover that, or at least for myself, I rarely ever discover in a moment that we're both on the same side. I discover that we're on the opposite sides of where we need to be. Because like I said, when I say that we're in different roles, I'm talking about a moment by moment basis. It's just like when you look at, going somewhere together. When you have two leaders, when two people are saying we're going this way and the other person is saying no, we're going this way, you can't go anywhere. So there can only be one person saying we're going in this direction, and the other one has to follow for things to move forward, metaphorically speaking. So on a moment by moment basis, there are moments when in my conditioned response, I most definitely go into being in this male posture when I don't need to be in it. And by doing that, I notice right away, because if I'm with my partner, or really any male in a way, any male that is there for a certain kind of dynamic, because obviously, let's say if I'm doing a session, they are there to learn. A teacher, quote, teacher or a guide is always going to be in a male position in relation to a student, just like a boss is always in a male position in relation to an employee. So we're talking about dynamics that are we're talking about energies. We're talking about the a feminine energy versus a masculine energy and the dance between the two. But when it comes to relationships, and that's where the challenge comes, is that when I go into that unnecessary positioning of taking a male role, I immediately see that my partner is something other than overjoyed, happy, juiced up, empowered. And again, we're talking about a moment by moment basis. What I also notice is that when I do that, I immediately lack my juiciness, empowerment, and feeling in alignment with self. So I'm literally saying that on a moment by moment basis, as we navigate through life, noticing when we are inappropriately out of alignment with where we need to be. And again, when we connect to the body lets us know if it feels good or if it doesn't feel good. And same is true in the other direction. I mean, there's times where maybe, and I see men doing this all the time, they'll go to a woman and they'll say, my partner doesn't do this, but this is a typical situation. Where do you want to go eat? Please don't ask. It's these positions where men place the woman in forcing her to guide or to lead a situation gets very uncomfortable for her. Now, does this mean that I'm never going to lead in a relating? Absolutely not, of course, because maybe I have some idea or some understanding about a certain topic. I'm going to share it. Right? We're always dancing in life. You're always playing between the masculine and the feminine. But where's your home base? Where is your center? Do you wear off? Meaning, do I do a session with somebody and go into this masculine of guiding and bringing clarity and speaking truth and doing all of that? And then when I come back to being with my partner, am I still doing that on him all day, every day? Or do I now get to relax and be in my feminine and not have to lead all day because it's exhausting for me? Do I do something with my body? Do I go water the plants? Now, my new meditation is watering plants. I have fallen in love with watering plants. Before it used to be washing dishes. I know it sounds funny. These are all things that a lot of people don't like. But I love doing something with my hands, with my body, that brings me out of my head and into my body, into quiet space. That's my feminine flow. That's where I relax in myself. And we all need to have those kinds of practices. So you can go into one role or the other, but then come back to center. Come back to your home base.
In your experience sharing your wisdom with people, with men and women right now, do you see a difference in the receptiveness of men and women, whether they do encounter you online or physically in the real world?
What do you mean by receptiveness?
Do they respond in a different way, whether they have a session with you online or offline?
I guess what I'm asking is, do you mean whether they respond to me in a different way based on what I'm sharing information-wise or through the body?
I would say through the body. Like, what is your experience? Is there a different experience for men and women when I'm having a session with you online, or if I'm with you in a room and I experience you? Is it easier for me, or?
Got it. Now I understand the question. Okay, great. So, just to reiterate, is the level of receptivity or experience different whether somebody's having an online session or an in-person session or experience? That's a great question. So, yes and no. There's a difference of yes and no. No, in the sense that when you're dealing with energy, it really doesn't matter whether you're in the same physical space or whether you are from a distance. Because energy is energy, there is no time and space. That doesn't matter at all. Now, what I find is that people are starving for touch. So it's not the energy that makes a big difference or impact in the energetic experiences that they have, but it's the fact that if I was to do an in-person session, I also place my physical hands on the body. And in that placement, it does some incredible healing magic for people, because most people are never touched. And when I say never touched, I'm also speaking about some people that have been married for 20, 30 years. They sleep in the same bedroom as their spouse, but they're never touched consciously. People do a lot of patting, a lot of unconscious touch, but they don't feel like anyone's really present with them in touch. So that in itself is quite healing. But from the energetic standpoint, whether it's online or whether it's in a workshop space, it's all the same. The other benefit for doing something physically is that it anchors you into the body. So where some people struggle with online sessions is that they tend to disassociate from their body. And that is a mechanism that comes in to prevent you from feeling the uncomfortable feelings that you have been hiding from in the first place. Whether it's trauma that's held in the body, whether it's unprocessed feelings, those moments of discomfort, your awareness goes, ooh, danger. We don't want to feel that again. You told me you never wanted to feel that again. So people on an online basis, because I'm not physically there, can kind of float out of their body, disassociate from the body. And of course, I'm always there to remind them, come back to the body, stay in the body. And what I'll communicate to them is oftentimes give them a little speech and say, hey, this is what's going on. You feel it. This is how the mechanism is. This is what your awareness does. And it takes a lot of courage to just get in there and say, hey, I want to be here to feel whatever's there. And usually after that speech, they pretty much dive in. But they need to get behind the wheel of their vehicle called the body to get there. And when I'm physically present, they tend to feel more accountable to stay in their body.
Yeah, I have it in my own experience. I mean, I've done breathwork training, and I've attended breathwork sessions online and offline. I mean, I've done the work with you offline, and I also experience it myself that sometimes it's more easy to just like, okay, go away. And I have that experience within my body that whenever something comes up that's unpleasant, it's just like such an easy mechanism of the body to shut off, to I fall asleep or whatever, and I just don't go there. And then it needs a little bit of a reminder, and then touch or a voice is very helpful to just bring me back to that and help me a little bit along the way to actually get to that point where I start feeling, where really those things come up, where I can open up to whatever needs to come out.
Exactly. And it's such a simple process, a liberation. Internal freedom is so simple. Free yourself of the baggage that sits between you and you internally. And that is the memories of trauma, the unprocessed feelings, the false belief patterns, all the stuff that we collect in a lifetime. Release that and you're God. You're free. And what people often do is that they're like, okay, give me a pill. What do I need to take? What kind of pill can I take to get rid of all that? But there is no magic pill. However, the process is simple. Feel through it. Feel through everything that you never finished feeling through. So all those unprocessed feelings that have been sitting in your body for 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, 70 years, Let yourself feel all the way through those feelings, be that sadness, be that anger, whatever it is, whatever is that thing that we quote is uncomfortable. And through to the other side is freedom. It's orgasmicness, it's joy. Because all of those things need to complete their feeling cycle. That's all it is. If you don't let yourself feel through these things fully, they get stuck. And of course, when we're speaking about trauma, there's a slightly different, how would I call it? There's a whole other layer of refinement to that process, because it's not just feelings that we're discharging. We're discharging the intensity that was provided to us in a fight or flight response. It's us being able to act out, so-called act out. I have to be very careful about the words that I choose here because people may misunderstand what I'm saying. But it's to do the thing that we were not allowed or able to do in the moment of a trauma. So for example, if we were in a situation where, let's say we were being physically beat, and we were small and we couldn't run and we couldn't scream because if we screamed we got hit even more. So now all of that intensity, all that adrenaline, all of that force that was given to us to fight or to flight, all of that is locked into the body and it freezes, it locks in our nervous system. And most people function out of a frozen nervous system. People walk around with a frozen nervous system. And doing the work that I do is really a way of re-alivening, activating, waking up the nervous system. And as it starts to do that, then all of that intensity from the trauma, all of that energy that never got discharged, that got locked in, needs to discharge itself through some way, shape, or form, which usually looks like the body starts to tremble or shake. The person may need to really let some loud sounds out of their body to get the intensity out. And when that happens, and again, we're talking about a moment of discomfort in comparison to living a dull life for a lifetime. So when we pass through that discomfort of just that discharge, that release, whatever needs to come out, now we're freed from it. Now there's space inside. And when there's space inside, we think, feel, and perceive reality in a whole other way. Because it's not the toxicity of the trauma that is stuck in our body impacting how we think, feel, and perceive reality. It's now clear way of seeing and perceiving reality.
I've experienced that as something that was also for me when I've come to your retreat, when I've come to your workshop. This was the first time that I experienced work like this. And I have to say for sure there was also a kind of different expectation. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And the moment I came, it came into my life quite surprisingly. Yeah, a woman that I just met within the first 24 hours said like, okay, I'm going to this retreat and you want to join me? And it's a Tantra retreat. And I was like, okay, that's something I haven't done before, but for whatever reason, life is just bringing that into my awareness. So why not go and try it out? And it was different from everything that I expected. And I found it very beautiful in the way that you created that safe space, that there was always an ability to check in with myself if it was something that I wanted to experience, or if you were opening up a space where I wanted to go, that I wanted to enter. And I felt, at least for everybody else, in the same way. And it felt like going through this, like also just reconnecting with my body in that moment, opening up to whatever needed to come, was very helpful to just step into all those possibilities. And I really enjoyed looking online on your website, doing a little bit of my research, seeing your offer. You're doing that retreat that is coming up, and then the invitation for people with trauma, people with health issues, people with depression, but also to happy and orgasmic people. So it felt really beautiful to see that, okay, everything is welcome, everything that needs to come. And how do you feel about that, holding that space for everything that needs to come?
I feel that's life. And I feel we need to do more of that, because that is what transforms everything that is unlike love into love, is by accepting everything as it is, inviting all of it in. And the transformation process is the same for everybody. Whether you're a happy person and you have more joy, whether you're a miserable person and you get happy, it's basically, if there's a door to happiness, I'm just saying everybody's welcome to show up, and we're all walking through that door. and it's necessary to invite all those different factors in, because literally you would be amazed to know how many people are struggling with situations in their life. We walk by people on the street, for example. I've really had such a gift and reward and privilege to know people on such an intimate level through conversation, because people confide in me about what really goes on for them internally, how they feel, their childhood experiences, just their life on such an intimate level, and also what kind of medication they're on. And let me tell you, it's been mind-boggling for me to see the amount of people that are on pharmaceuticals, the amount of people that are dealing with anxiety, depression, sexual dysfunction, all kinds of things that if you just saw them walking on the street, you would never, ever guess. And they all live these private, hidden lives that no one really knows about. And as I said, I've been very privileged to kind of get this like inside scoop into what's going on in people's lives on this intimate level. And I want to create the space for everybody to come and be human. And that's why everybody's welcome.
So you also open up that space, and as I've seen, the retreat is for, I think, like 9 days, which is a little bit longer than most of the retreats. How do you feel about taking that time? Why is it that you're taking that time to spend with people and to create that space?
Yeah, I wish I had more time than 9 days. I feel like it could go on for much longer than that. But 9 numerologically also is completion. It's the number 9 brings a completion to a cycle, which is beautiful and just kind of worked out coincidentally in some way. But I find that 9 days is just the right amount of time for people to arrive, show up, get triggered, and come out the other side. And I say that because, some people get triggered in the first couple of days, and then the rest of the retreat, they have a great time. Other people may have the perfect retreat for the first 7 days. And just on day 8 is when the good stuff comes up. And I'm always waiting for that good stuff, because basically the retreats that I create, the experiences that I create, is to dig deep and come up with whatever doesn't serve you in your day-to-day life. And to know that you need to have the time and the space to have lots of different stimuli, experiences, interactions, because some of them might not trigger you, others do. What I'm looking for is those triggers. Because what creates misery for us as humans is all the time that we are triggered by all kinds of stuff. We don't know how to process it. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't know where it comes from. It's just being controlled by other forces, basically. And in these experiences, whatever it is that you came for to transform, it's going to be addressed. And that's the beauty of it. That's my intention. You're asking me. Now, from the intention of speaking about it as a retreat, there's just so many exercises, so many different opportunities, so many things that I want to share that give people different types of experiences to explore themselves, to discover themselves, to play within their own self. So it's just the right amount of time to do that without overwhelming the nervous system. Because, I find that for a lot of retreats that I've seen other people offer, they either do something where it's like a very loose agenda. And, maybe you have like a little yoga class in the morning, and then you have a break, and then you have an evening session. Sometimes you don't even have to participate in everything. You just kind of pick and choose. Or I've seen other retreats where it's like boot camp. You're just forced to do things all the time, all the time, all the time. I don't want to do that. I want to create a journey for people that I myself would want to experience. And that is the journey of being, metaphorically speaking, taken by the hand of an exploration of my own self that is gentle, that is sweet, and just is expansive enough within my own self that I can discover parts of myself that I didn't without overwhelming myself in the process. And that's the journey that I always attempt to create. And we do so many things. I mean, really, there's nothing like experiencing this work in a residential environment where you are living in it. And one of the things that I always shared and wanted to do prior to doing retreats is that I wanted people to get a taste of my world. Because while we live in this world of insanity, and we have normalized a lot of insanity, I'm always telling people, you don't have to do that. Life can be different. Life can be this way. You can have pleasure. You can have joy. You can be surrounded by loving, compassionate human beings. You can have clear communication. We can live together without violence. So for me, the retreat space is like a little island of sanity, of love, of compassion, of sweetness, of beauty, so that people can come into it, live in it, and go, wow, this is possible. This is life. This is what our experiences in life can be like. And I wish the retreats were longer than 9 days, because to be quite frank, after those 9 days, no one wants to leave. It's set up to be an educational experience, but it's set up to give you a taste. How we can live together, how we can experience ourselves, how we can relate together, and just what life can look like. So it's my little bubble of love and beauty that I want to pull people into.
Yeah, I can totally confirm that, also seeing from the retreats that I host myself or when I'm in retreat, just being together with people, sharing the space for a while, and then showing them that, okay, life can be different. The way we interact with each other with compassion and love, that in itself is already a practice, and sharing that with others, letting them experiencing that. And it's something that many people just don't have in their life nowadays, just like working their 9 to 5 and not having family around them, and creating a space where we can feel that. And then also, yeah, okay, like what comes up, that sometimes just a setting of a retreat not the actual practice. And the actual practice is absolutely valuable, but sometimes just the setting of a retreat in itself creates so much opportunity for deep work and things that need to come out. And sometimes a lot of the work is happening between sessions.
Absolutely. And that to me is my favorite part. That's my favorite part. I know everybody else, loves the retreat. Like I said, it's a beautiful program. I don't give out the details of the program because I want people to just go in on a journey and have that adventure in the journey. But it's the in between. And as you said, for retreats, it's really beautiful, just retreats in general, to have this community and this family type environment that a lot of people are missing, really all of us, because we don't really live in communities. We live just in our homes with our family unit, but not in communities. And I guess what I also really, in a way, pride myself with is that at the retreats that I'm creating, it's, yeah, we're in community, but we're being real. The other part about the retreats also is, I'm speaking about all the things that are deep for me. And why are they deep for me? Because I've been doing this work for a long time. So the parts of the work, it's, day to day, all the time, all day, every day. It's kind of the same thing. So I'm focusing on that, but I realize that for people listening to this, what they're drawn to is the work. And so what is the work? What is this retreat about? It's about using our orgasmic potential for healing, for empowering, and for becoming more conscious. So the energy work that we do is to release whatever is there and to empower ourselves into orgasmicness. So a lot of people don't even realize that full body orgasms are real. To them, it's like some supernatural phenomenon. It's not. Anybody can have a full body orgasm. So they can experience that. They can experience orgasmic states. They can experience life without trauma weighing them down. They can experience the turning point after the sexual abuse that they've been carrying around for a lifetime, that they've been to therapy for 20 years. And after going through this experience, they have a huge transformation and a turning point. Whatever that abuse may have been, whatever sexual dysfunction they're dealing with, whatever their problems are, that's why the space is for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, you've been miserable your whole life, or if you're just super orgasmic and joyous and you want more out of life. This retreat is to bring you to the next level. Whatever level you're at, it's to raise that level up. And that goes for everyone. The process is the same. The deeper you connect to your own essential being, the more that you allow for orgasmic energy to move through you, the more connected you are to spirit, your life changes and transforms. And that's what this retreat is about. It's about freedom, internal freedom, liberation, love, compassion, being human. And of course, I'm going to throw in orgasmicness because that's what pulls people in.
Hi, this is a little note from your host. I'm super grateful that you are here and listen to our conversation. If you enjoy the show, why not become a member of Retreat Affairs? There's so much more content than in this free episode. As a member, you will get access to the full interview, you will be able to read the transcript, and have the links to everything that was mentioned throughout the show. But most importantly, you will help me to keep the podcast going. I started this as a project that's close to my heart. I'm passionate about the podcast, but it also keeps me busy quite a lot. By supporting me, you will help me to dedicate more time to this project and still be able to pay my rent and have some delicious plant-based food between recording sessions. Every bit of support is super welcome. And if you feel the love, don't forget to share this with your friends. Thank you so much for your time and your interest. Let's go back to the interview. I totally like that and I totally get that. And maybe my question wasn't pointing in the right direction, but you put it in the most perfect way, because at least something that I've experienced for myself was also a situation, like one of my most profound spiritual experiences, where I felt not only the pain within my own body, but also the pain of everybody else that I was sharing the room with in that moment. And in that moment, also the pain of everybody else that has ever lived on this planet. I was just feeling that pain, um, which was not, in that sense, pleasurable experience, but it was so deep and profound that I would probably also call it orgasmic, because I felt so much connected to everything that is. And maybe it's sometimes just my own expectation, in the sense that everything needs to feel beautiful, but also having had experience where really going into that pain and really feeling my own vulnerability, every time that I felt hurt in my life, really allowing to feel that and not storing it away, it feels orgasmic. It feels like something needs to come out, and it's just wow.
Resistance is uncomfortable. Feeling anything deeply feels good. It feels free. And I really like to do my best, although it's challenging, to shy away from labels. Why do we even have to put categories to experiences and call them as is this orgasmic? Does this feel good? Does it not feel good? Just let experiences happen through you. Even with the word tantra, when you came to that workshop, that kind of retreat, that was not organized by me. Somebody else put it together, somebody else threw the title on it, so I had the word tantra in it. I never used the word. You will not find it anywhere on my website. Even now with this Netflix documentary, when the producer called me and said she wants to do this about tantra and she wanted me to talk about tantra, I said to her, I don't use that word. I just do the work that I do. And of course, when they filmed it, they recorded probably like 3 hours of the sit down interview with me. And out of those 3 hours, she did the best she could to pull whatever little sound bites that she could get out of me that had the word tantra in it. She used it because that was what the episode was about, And now in the media, they're calling me the tantra guru. I'm like, are you serious, people? But the media is gonna do.
To be honest, I had this written down as one. First, I wanted to have it as my initial question, like, how did you actually feel about them putting those comments right at the beginning of that documentary? Because I saw that there is nothing written about tantra on your website and everything, and then having that kind of, I watched the episode and it felt a little bit. I've experienced your work, I've experienced you in person, and then seeing how they put those little comments right in front of the documentary, it felt a little bit like, really?
I know. Well, I'm glad to be having this conversation with you, because I'm glad that you picked up on it, because you're more connected to the work. You knew me from before, but obviously for other people, I've had a lot of really, really just tons of beautiful emails from the episode. And then some people, saying, how do you call yourself a tantra guru? I'm like, I have never in my life called myself a tantra guru. So, they have to do what they have to do. And as I said, it got pulled like that. It's misleading, out of everything that I had shared. And especially the part where it says, I know it sounds funny, but I am tantra. It's out of context. People really misunderstand, and it sounds very arrogant, like, oh, I am tantra. But I was attempting to explain to her in so many different ways that tantra is everything. It is life. It's the all. There is no way of defining it clearly. So in the end, after describing all of that, I said, I am tantra, you are tantra, everything. It's all of life. But then they pull that out and make it look a certain type of way. But I'm very grateful for, like, TV is going to be TV always. TV is going to do TV. But I'm very grateful for the way they put it together. It's, we filmed for 4 days, like 4 full days. And I kept thinking, how are they going to take all of that and try to package it into, a short little segment? And I was really touched by how they presented the couple. They were so lovely, such beautiful people. And I got teary-eyed when I was watching the episode, just being so moved by Jason's words and Amber. It's just there. It was very touching to see their process. Obviously, it's a tiny little segment out of everything that happened that weekend. Those 4 days, but I think they did okay, and it definitely has given me a lot of exposure. But I've gotten some cultural appropriation messages, just funny little things, and a lot of people drawing assumptions. I really feel for celebrities now, I have to tell you. In my own little tiny world, just getting a taste of how the types of gossip that's created and assumptions that people create based on whatever they try to pull from, it's just hilarious, to be honest.
I just want to go back one more time to the retreat. In the time of a retreat, spending 9 days with your guests, is there also moments where you feel the work on yourself, or how does it affect yourself, and how do you stay in your center, your energy? How do you maintain that?
I don't know that I have any other option, to be honest. I mean, I feel that, honestly, and this is interesting, there's different ways to teach and different ways to do retreats. Some people have a curriculum and a program and a thing that they know they're going to say, do, and all of that. And another way of doing it is letting go and letting God. And it really gets you high, I have to admit. I love being in the unknown. Because when you're in that deep level of the unknown, and you're that deep service to something higher than you, it's the most incredible feeling. It's uncomfortable because you're totally in the unknown. But there's such a deep trust that you have to go into to be used by God, by a higher force, by whatever divine energy needs to come through and use you. It's something incredible, and it only works in deep surrender. And that is the only way that I can stay centered. Because if any more of Sasha was involved, she would be exhausted after 9 days. But the more Sasha is less involved and of service to be used by something greater, the more ease she feels throughout the whole retreat, and it's magic that happens. I honestly cannot take credit for this work at all. I cannot take credit for facilitating the retreats. There is something greater that I'm just a vessel for, and I am so deeply grateful to be used in this kind of way. It's the most humbling experience. And that's really the dance. The dance is not about being centered. The dance is, how can I let go more? And that's basically it. That's how I stay balanced. And I know what I can handle. I know what I can't. Meaning, there's times when we have little breaks and I just can't be talking to people during that break. I have my moments of silence. It's just a lot of moments of silence that I need. And again, it comes back to the same thing. I go into silence because out of silence, I receive information. So even throughout the retreat, when we take bathroom breaks and people always want to come up in the bathroom break to ask a question, and I always say, please keep your questions to be shared for the group. Also because when people ask questions in the group, it benefits so many people listening to the question and the answer. But overall, when I have those breaks, when we're taking a bathroom break or whatever, that moment of silence is where I receive communication for more. Be a vessel. Be empty. The more empty that I am, the more effortless the work is. And that's really the art.
Beautiful. Thank you. Before I close it here, I feel we're at a really beautiful space. Is there anything that you want to share that we've been missing that you want to give out?
Yeah, question everything. As my message to people, I guess is what you're asking. Question everything and let love be your greatest spiritual practice. Love. That is it. Love, love, love. Be love, speak love, act love. Be the embodiment of love. What would love say? What would love do? How would love be? It will transform you from the inside out in the deepest levels. You don't need meditation. You don't need yoga. You don't need anything. Be love. And life will shower you with so much beauty.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha Cobra.
Thank you, Sasha. To you as well.
Dear friends, this was another episode of the Retreat Affairs podcast, this time with Sasha Cobra. If you want to find out more about Sasha, you can go to her website, sashacobra.com. That's SASHACOBRA.com. There, you will find everything about the work, the retreats that Sasha is offering, and how to get in contact for private sessions with her. You can also follow her on Instagram at Sasha Cobra, or on facebook.com/Sasha Cobra, or on Twitter at Sasha Cobra, or on her YouTube channel where you will find more interviews and examples of her work. You will find all the links in the show notes, as well as the links to all the other things that we talked about. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google or Spotify, or any other podcast platform. Or head over to YouTube where you will find us too. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified about the next episode. And please give me a chance to ask you for your support. I make the podcast with lots of love and dedication, but it's also quite a bit of work. It would mean the world to me if you could help me to keep this work going. Please consider going to retreataffairs.com, where you can leave a little donation or subscribe to get exclusive content that will only be available to members. This will allow me to continue the podcast and bring you more wonderful and inspiring stories like the one you just heard. Thank you for your support and thank you for listening. Until next time, your host, Sasha Kaus.